or the religious establishment. The prince's desire for tolerance, his heterodox views, or his rejection of Islam are in fact far removed from where he in fact was coming from. If anything, Dara Shikoh's writings seek to place him squarely within the Islamic tradition, even as, of course, he relegates his conservative religious establishment to hell. In fact, even in death, Dara Shikoh is said to have reaffirmed his allegiance to Islam. This is chronicled by a clearly astonished author of a contemporaneous source, the Tarikh-e-Shah Shujai, who notes that following the prince's execution and beheading, and I quote him here, the head of Prince Dara Shikoh repeated aloud the Kalma-e-Shahadat. People supposedly heard it and fled in fright. Okay. If Dara Shikoh's career, as recounted by me, does not quite fit commonly held stereotypes, neither does Aurangzeb's. In the remaining 8 minutes, roughly, I'd like to briefly consider what we know of Aurangzeb's relationship to Islam in the decades prior to his accession to the Mughal throne, the same period when he was in intense political competition with Dara Shikoh. In other words, I'm not looking at the post-1658-59 period, the long reign of Aurangzeb. What I'm trying to actually establish over here is who Aurangzeb tried to position himself as prior to his accession to the throne. In a nutshell, where Dara Shikoh antagonized powerful religious networks both at and beyond the imperial court, Aurangzeb cultivated individuals and groups, including those with whom he disagreed. Indeed, if I can make one judgment about Aurangzeb's princely career, it is this. He largely kept his personal beliefs to himself. As a result, although he seems to have personally subscribed to the literalist formula of Billah Kaif, or without asking how, on questions of kalam or metaphysics, he nonetheless simultaneously patronized Arifun or Gnostics and rationalists like Sheikh Burhan Raze-Ilahi Shattari, Shah Waliullah Hussaini Chishti, and Sheikh Muhyiddin Abu Yusuf Yahya Chishti, all of whom were open to allegorical understandings of the revelation and embraced theological speculation. Although Aurangzeb's correspondence as a prince highlights personal ambivalence towards tomb veneration, he never stopped his followers from visiting the shrines of Sheikh Zainuddin Chishti or Sheikh Burhanuddin Gharib while he was in the Deccan. And Aurangzeb never hesitated to give large cash grants to repair the shrines of such Sohrawardi luminaries as Sheikh Bahauddin Zakaria or Sayyid Zainul Abidin. Even as Aurangzeb refused to patronize and maintain artists within his princely household, he did pointedly marvel at the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain murals and rock-hewn temples at Ellora during a visit in 1656. An amazed Aurangzeb supposedly would describe the whole complex of temples and sculptures as the marvels of the workmanship of God. Despite the common impression of Aurangzeb's intolerance towards other faiths, meaning non-Islamic faiths, a surviving 1656 Nishan or princely order addressed to Rana Raj Singh of Mewar strikes a distinctly quote-unquote tolerant note. And I quote it in its entirety over here. Men belonging to various communities and different religions should live in the valley of peace and pass their days in prosperity. No one should interfere with the affairs of one another. Anyone of this sky glorious group, that is the kings of India, who resort to intolerance become the cause of dispute and conflict and harm to the people. That non-Muslims had no reason to doubt Aurangzeb's goodwill is perhaps best evidenced by the very strong political and military support he received during the course of his struggle to win the Mughal throne in 1657-58. In a similar vein, Aurangzeb succeeded in winning the backing of broad alliances of Muslims. None perhaps, however, is more surprising than the wide support he received from members of the Qadri Tariqa. And this was despite the fact that Dara Shikoh, not Aurangzeb, was the person who counted himself as a Qadri, and even adopted the takhallus or nom de plume of Qadri for his own poetry. So what did Dara Shikoh do wrong with regard to his own Sufi order, or more appropriately, what did Aurangzeb do right? How do you account for the fact that the vast majority of Qadris threw their weight behind Aurangzeb and not Dara Shikoh? It seems that Dara Shikoh's proximity to state power, his attempts to project himself as one of the leading Qadri luminaries of his generation, his willingness to play different Qadri peers one off against the other, and the nature and tenor of his religious inquiries combined to ultimately alienate many a fellow Qadri. I suspect that these divisions would have likely been papered over, even if only temporarily, if Aurangzeb had indeed been viewed by most Qadris as an orthodox Muslim ogre who would ignore or hurt their tariqah during his reign. The fact, however, is this. Aurangzeb managed to neutralize Qadri support for his older brother precisely by building his own ties and alliances within the tariqah throughout the 1640s and 1650s. In the end, it was Aurangzeb and not Dara Shikoh who convinced not only the majority of Qadris, but also a whole range of other Muslim and non-Muslim religious networks as well, that his accession would prove beneficial for all concerned, that he indeed was the best guardian of imperial strength and stability, and that his brother, not himself, was the real religious radical. To conclude, it is clear in my mind that just as Aurangzeb does not represent the Islamic backlash in mid-17th century South Asia, neither does Dara Shikoh necessarily offer a tolerant, softer vision of Islam. Ultimately, it was nothing more nor less than Dara Shikoh's almost uncontested ability to antagonize friend and foe alike, compared to Aurangzeb's almost unequaled ability to paper over differences that ultimately enabled one prince to ascend the imperial throne and the other to be consigned to the grave. Thank you.